This is the Mind Body Detox podcast, where we discuss all things integrative health and wellness, interviewing folks from all over the world, sharing insights and wisdom for how to live a healthier life in mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mind Body Detox podcast. I'm your host, Mind Body Medium Karen Lovehart, and today's topic today, we're going to be talking about creativity, consciousness, and cosmic alignment. So we're going to be integrating a little bit of astrology in here. So our guest today is Angel Living, and Angel is an evolutionary astrologer, a creative guide, and a meditation facilitator with a background in psychological and evolutionary astrology. Heart Math mentorship. So you guys heard me talk about the Heart Math Institute, love them, and an intentional creativity support. So she helps bridge mystical experiences with grounded wisdom. So we're going to talk about all those crazy, awesome, spiritual, mystical experiences you may be having or may have had. And we're going to talk about how to integrate them with creative expression, somatic awareness, and astrology as a tool for personal transformation. Angel offers workshops that have practical ways to navigate life's transitions with confidence and clarity and emotional resilience, because that is one of the huge ways that we use these mystical experiences that we have, not a lot of times during our big transitions in life. So I'm excited to bring on Angel to our podcast today. So welcome to the show, Angel. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Kara. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Well, as far as your background and personal journey, let's start and dive into how creativity has played a role in your personal evolution.
Yeah. So believe it or not, I used to feel like I didn't have a creative bone in my body. And it's kind of weird. Like if you look around me and see the paintings that are all over the place, most people don't believe that, but it's true. And it's sad because when I was little, I was very creative, like most of us are in our own unique ways. But that went away over the years. A lot of people have those experiences where it's just not important or it's not valued or you don't feel like you're good enough, or you'll be a starving artist if you try to pursue this journey, any of those things. So it just kind of went away, but it always whispered to me. And once during a really difficult health crisis, actually, is when I just picked up a pen and a piece of paper and I started drawing mandalas, like a dot and then following the lines from there. So that's where it began for me.
Well, especially when we're like disconnected from our creativity for a long time, if we've really disconnected at all, I feel like when I've worked with clients or I've reconnected in that way, it's like there's a sense of the unique essence of who you are that starts to come through you, like when you're not judging it and you're just allowing it to come through. And I think that's where when we see it in like our little child coming up to ourselves and saying, look what I created. And there's no judgment. There's not like better or worse. There's just like look what I made.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really unique experience in that we have the opportunity to connect with when we are expressing our creativity. And I think people have a misconception about it, right? Do they often say to you, like, I don't know how to paint or I'm not good at it? I'm kind of curious as far as, how do you help other people when you're navigating, helping them get in touch with their creativity?
Yes, Kara. Yes to all of those things that you said. People say those. I was just working with a client this week, in fact, who really felt she never could be creative. And we've just completed a 5-week series where she has a painting now that is essentially what has been going on for her inside over this period of time that we've been working together is now outside. So she sees that, oh, wow, I can be creative. And I think the thing that is really nice, especially about the way I share creativity with others, is that it's non-representational art. So we're not really trying to make something that looks like a thing. It's expressive. And when people have that little experience that just says, oh, wait, I actually can do this, I can feel this way, that makes a difference. So it's small steps. It's not like I'm not creative and now, wow, look what I've done. It's I'm not creative and, oh, wait, maybe I am creative. And we just keep going from there.
I really love that you're helping people get in touch with unique expression of themselves. And I think it was about 10 years ago that we started to see these pop-up places that was like wine and paint parties, which was a really nice activation point for people. I think that people wanted to start playing around and doing it in a way that was fun, but there was a lot of apprehension. And it wasn't until that time, I have a lot of friends in the art community that are really active in there. And I heard from them saying people are really disconnected from their creativity. And I never associated that. I'm such a creative person. It just has come out in different ways. And when it has been shut down, like I felt like I was dead inside. And then I first made this connection with my friends who are with artists that said there's so many people that don't ever have an outlet. They don't think they can do it. And these painting, wine and sip parties, and even just those coloring books was almost like a jump starting of the car for certain people just to get the gears rolling. So I love that you're taking someone a step further to creating uniquely from their essence with, I'm guessing, their story and what's going on with them. And that's even more powerful. So that kind of takes us into this personal experiences that we have with our life, whether they're joyful, whether there's grief, whether there's tragedy. We have transitions that come. And sometimes they can cross over with mystical experiences, whether it's giving birth, having a near-death experience, losing someone. And even we're going to talk a little bit about non-ordinary experiences through meditation, through breathwork, even through psychedelics today. We're going to discuss that. So tell us about how you connected first, mystical experiences and creativity. Like, where did that fall in to your life?
Yeah. So the training that I took in intentional creativity was the key that changed, I just want to say my putting a paintbrush in my hand happened at one of those wine and paint nights in, I think it was 2013. So yes, to that, like that absolutely has been a great thing for a lot of people. And this is a little different because in intentional creativity, we're not trying to make something look like anything that we see on the outside. We are entering a relationship with who we are on the inside and inviting that onto the canvas.
And that's something that you developed that's called creative synthesis, correct?
Yeah. So creative synthesis is my blend of intentional creativity, basically, and astrology for those who want it. And for not, there's like a pathway also. It doesn't have to include that. But it's developed on what I've learned through intentional creativity and my own creative reclamation journey. And heart math, you mentioned that. So basically, all of the tools that I've gathered over the years have been synthesized into that approach.
And how does that connect in with mystical experiences that people might have, or the mystical experience that pulls out that expression of the self?
So it is said in the intentional creativity circles that painting in this way is the closest thing you can have to a psychedelic experience without actually ingesting a substance. So it is kind of like that. We really, there's guided imagery, there's writing, there's, just moving our bodies, connecting with the canvas. So when we do all of these things, we're dropping out of the mind where we normally are and entering into this mystery, right? So that is one of the ways that happens. But the other thing I really like to tell people, and this is specific to creative synthesis, is that it works in reverse too. Like we can have a mystical experience and take it to the canvas, but we can also prepare ourselves for these non-ordinary states of consciousness by way of creating. So it's both. It gives us an opportunity to integrate and to be prepared.
One of the things that I was just popped into my head, like just now after you just said that, is I've experienced that anytime someone has created something from, let's just say their true essence, I call it that, or from a flow state, or from being in a non-ordinary state, they're just really there, they're creating, they're expressing, whether it's like a canvas art piece or sculpture or even music or any sort of dance. or even meal. I feel like there's something really special and unique in the energy and the expression, especially for me as a medium. It's imbibed with energy, with just like their source from source. There it is. It's right there. There's something really powerful about that. And I would love to just share a little bit on your experiences with dropping into these flow states through getting into a non-ordinary experience. What does that look like for someone who is preparing to go in without taking any psychedelics? What does that look like for you? And how did you maybe learn to get into that state?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. It didn't start out that way. So the invitation was there, but for me, it took dropping in a couple times to really start to trust that there actually was some communication happening, right? Because we're usually kind of blocked in that area. Most people, if you're not a medium, right, you walk around the world and you're not really aware of everything else that's going on. So getting over the critic was a big thing, which is why I share these shorter practices that kind of help address those issues and give us a better relationship to have with that part of ourselves that's naturally going to arise to protect us from making things that people might not approve of, right? So there's a little preparation there, but once you kind of feel like you can drop into that, like I'm really big on bringing the body into this experience. So because I use paint a lot or markers or crayons or other things, like feeling our bodies connected to this instrument, right? It's a crayon, but it's also a magic wand. Like we're setting the stage for this little by little, and that's how it opens. So you're not just kind of tossed in and here you go. Here's your mystical experience, ready or not, right? There's steps involved.
I'm thinking about the process of when I had to get very anchored as a person, as a medium. And there was, interestingly, 8 months of my life where I was hyper in like only beta brainwaves for the most of the day. Like for me, we talk about this on the podcast that dropping into flow states is more in like an alpha or theta brainwave state where you're in meditative consciousness. And that's how that's how I share with the listeners how we connect in to things that are beyond ourself or even to symbolic realm. And it was so interesting for the 8 months of my life. There was almost the absence of creativity. It was a lot more mental chatter, the inner critic you mentioned. It was a lot more fear and logic based oriented time and functioning for this and that. And now I've used that to integrate that as a business owner. You have to operate within time and schedules and resource management. But it's interesting you said that because I think a lot of us do get caught up in that because of the system that we're living in. The system that we're living in doesn't give us space to breathe, to check out a little bit, to get our brainwaves into a nice altered dreamlike state in the middle of the day and just daydream for a second and then come back. We are pushed to perform and to continue going and doing. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that process of working with someone and how do you get them connected into that authentic self? Like maybe an example for astrology, because I think that is a really beautiful portal or window to knowing thyself a little bit deeper and then maybe connecting it with that, how they then express it. Could you share a little about maybe about what it looks like for someone who's curious of your process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will start just with this one simple thing because it actually leads to astrology too, and it's drawing a circle. You mentioned like we're just go, 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 do, and we're on to the next thing during our busy day, right? So something that's really simple is to give ourselves a moment to draw a circle over and over again. Most people, when I introduce this exercise, they draw one circle and then they judge it because it's not perfectly round, right? So this isn't what we're doing. We're doing it over and over again. And we're just dropping in and allowing, it's almost like, you know, when you do shoulder shrugs and you'll say, we're just imagining we're letting the weight come off. That's a way to do this creatively. So that is like a basic model. And the circle, of course, is also in astrology. That's why that's what we see when we look at a natal chart. And I don't typically use creativity right away when I'm working with someone. If I do an astrological consultation on a natal chart, we're going to mostly have conversations. Maybe we'll do some psychosynthesis work and some guided imagery if it calls for it, but that's a process that happens later. Like the creative synthesis piece comes after we've been present to what we are dealing with in with
I love that. I'm having another question that just came up. So I'm envisioning how I've operated, and I'm really curious how this works out for your clients. So for me, when I'm looking to create something in my life, I'm looking at where I'm at. I'm checking with my body and checking in with my consciousness. Even I look at my astrology chart. There's a lot of self-awareness that goes into it. And in the past, I've done vision boards. Sometimes I'll do more creative stuff. Sometimes I'll journal. But all that to me is a creative process of creation and moving through either an emotion, moving through a mental process, and then maybe even actually creation, like creating this goal and this is outcome. And then, hey, asking the universal forces of love, life, God, source, creator, help me do this. I'm curious how the process of creative synthesis works with your clients and actually like creating and manifesting or moving through things, because I have other artist friends that this is what they do. They're like, no, this is how I create. Not only create through processing through grief or sadness or anger, but then when I come to the other side, this is how I then created a new relationship or a new job or a new opportunity. So I'm curious about how that works with you. I can't imagine you wouldn't be doing that because of where you are and who you are, but my brain just thought, let me ask her.
Oh, yeah. Well, part of that is a great segue for the New Moon Blessing book, which is one of the things that I do. It's a community of creativity and attuning to the lunar cycles. And there are all kinds of ways. This is where I get really excited because there are big ways. Like I have paintings, for example. I'm divorced. I've made a couple paintings around the processing of that. And in that journey, have created a whole new life for myself. So absolutely use paintings to manifest what I want in the world, but almost as an accident, it's because the process itself opens me up and clarifies me to what I want. Like you can leave one relationship and get into another relationship and have a replay, right, of the relationship dynamics that you just left. Or you can get out of a relationship, take it to the canvas, which is what I do. So of course that's what I teach, and be curious, be in a state of wonder, like cultivate wonder in pain to move through it. So there's that piece. But we do things every month at the new moon, a couple days before the new moon, actually, we prepare wishing pages. So that is like a really fun, practical, community oriented, easy way to, of course, be with, like I always say, don't put any desire off the board, right? If you want something, you want something. Let's just be with it. Let's explore it. So, but it helps you get clear on what you really want, why, like what's the essential need of this one. And yeah, and that's a monthly kind of thing. So creating great big paintings that take months or doing this thing once a month for an hour and even smaller. I really like the range of it. That's important.
Thank you for that.
Right.
I will just say a quick side note, just for anyone listening, on my take on manifestation, just a real brief. I think when you're doing a lot of self-exploration, you're putting your energy and your focus into any area, whether it's through painting or through vision boarding or whatever. We do see people have these interesting synchronicities and things come up where they're like, well, I created that, right? And I always say, like, my take on it is the more you unravel through processes like these, like working with you, to find out who you really are, like you're uncovering and you're evolving as well. I feel like the more you're washing away the layers of things that are not the self, then quote unquote manifestation or life just starts happening through you. And it's not necessarily anymore a conscious process. Like you said, it wasn't a conscious process of, I'm going to create this, because a lot of times when we say I'm going to create this, it's sometimes from like our smaller ego selves versus this bigger, more expansive consciousness that comes through us when we're creating things like this. So I just wanted to share that for the listener, because I think there's a lot of different people that teach on manifestation out there. And I don't say there's any right or wrong way to do it. I just wanted to share my take on it. And I just love how I can see how that can birth someone expanding their self and feeling themselves and then having life, or a better life, or more improved life coming through the process of working with you.
Yeah, I love that you gave voice to that, because it's absolutely how I approach it too. And I just think it's a lot of fun to go back into my journals. I have boxes and bins and journals galore. And when I look back at things that I wrote that I wanted, not that I was trying to necessarily manifest anything, but just where I was in my consciousness, and to see how that's changed and how those things that were so important, right? It needs to be this way. I have to control it. It's got to come out like this, are just like, you know, whatever, like so far out of my awareness until I pick up those books. But that's how creativity can help us. So we don't even know what we really need a lot of the time.
Yeah. And that creative experience, you're expanding beyond the day-to-day thought processes of what you think. And it's unlearning, and you're opening to a broader expression of life. And I think that is a magical thing that can be very mystical, ongoing. Like you're just dropping, oh wow, look what happened here. Look what we created here.
It is. The only other thing I just want to add to that is that you enter by those everyday experiences, right? So we go in with what's weighing us down. That leads us to the mystical experience, as opposed to, I want to get rid of the weight that I'm carrying and move into this mystical experience.
I completely agree. And I always say, what we resist persists, and what we embrace, we erase. So you're really just allowing life to happen through you, because we can't, the more people do push things under the rug, sweep things under the rug, avoid, disassociate, we know through Mind Body Detox, this whole podcast, and even the program we run, that concept is what creates more problems for us. And that's why we see the problems manifest in the world that we have to the degree that we have, because we have avoided, or we've disassociated, or we've blamed. And instead of moving through each of our individual experiences that we all have responsibility for, of the emotions that we have as humans, and leaning into each other, we need to, and all that. So to wrap up this part here, what do you think happens in non-ordinary states of awareness that help people to integrate their creativity?
Well, I feel like being open to a non-ordinary state of consciousness and then expressing it like that, it's that act. It's the act of expression. It's the act of having this experience, because we don't even necessarily need to have a big mystical experience, but we can have, like, if you almost get into an accident, right? Let's say, or you're in an accident, but everyone's okay. Like those moments that kind of jar us out of our regular thinking mind, open us up to this different way of thinking. And that will fade over time. But creating something out of that experience gives you the opportunity to continue to work with it and see that it was real. Like imagine whatever you've created to represent this experience is sitting on your desk every day. Or we tell people a lot of times it's refrigerator art. Like we're fond of drawing hearts and circles, and people write messages to themselves. Put it on your refrigerator, because you're now in a relationship with creation when you make something of it. So I'd say it's that space between the mystical experience and living it is an act of creation.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. I want to ask the question. So for someone who feels like they're not creative and they have a very logical oriented way that they feel like, I'm stuck in this, and they might be asking like, I don't know if I've ever had a mystical experience. what is a mystical experience? Because it can be a spectrum, it's not something like it's always huge, it can be subtle. Could we experience or share what that is to you and the different types of subtle things that people might happen to their experience in their senses so that we can grasp this concept of a non-ordinary or mystical experience for someone who might be like, I've never had one, or I don't know if I've had one, or how do I know if I've had one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, it happens in, I'll just use creativity as an example, because if I am painting, it's almost like a switch goes off. A lot of people can recognize that they engage in activities and it's like time doesn't exist anymore. Like you're having a good time, right? So it's moments like that where or maybe where you're walking. I'm very body based. So I'll think about like, what does it smell like to be walking in the woods after it's just rained? And, maybe there's mist coming through. So for me, the body is a very mystical experience. And I like to connect people in that way, because when we realize that it's like we are the mystery, living in the mystery, experiencing the mystery. It's just that our mental chatter keeps us from really seeing that, and lots of other things that we chatter about, right? Safety, security, fear of harm, like especially right now in the world that we're living in, all of those things keep us locked out of recognizing that the mystery is just constantly occurring around us. So in that way, like, I think mystical experiences are pretty ordinary in a lot of ways. And then there are the extraordinary ones that really take you, I've had psychedelic experiences that have been really challenging to integrate after the fact. And that can be that's a whole different realm. But if you think about, like, if you're someone who feels like, psychedelics might be appropriate on my healing journey, but you've never had an experience, starting with something like this can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. I'd love to dive into that a little bit because I love first how you shared about the mystical experience being body based as well, because I think there may be a conceptual idea of it being like seeing spirits or angels or having the near death experience, or I'm trying to think this extraordinary things that people have, like sensing a tree and like connecting with it on a spiritual level or something like that, where it may be more of a mental, internal, visual like experience, like a dream or a daydream. And I think that's more of a mental, conceptual, clairvoyant, mystical experience that is possible. The body based experiences you're talking about, that's very like sacral, it's very sensual, it's very five senses. And I think we could relate to that if we had like a delicious piece of cake or cookie or dinner or something that you just were fully pulled back into the present moment. To me, it's losing time because in the present there is no time. And I think anything that pulls us out of that, you said, through the mundane with the regular day-to-day experiences, or even something extraordinary, you almost just get in a car accident or something, you pause and you're like, you get very present. To me, because I didn't operate in a space of time for most of my life, I actually learned later on, as I spent 30 years of my life trying to get very embodied, very into time and space orientation, because my brain just didn't operate that way as a medium. And that helped me to understand where people do get stuck. They're stuck in that time and that thinking mind and comparing past to future. And it wasn't until I had my first psychedelic experience with two counselors that have been doing it for many years that halfway into, it was a psilocybin experience. It was 2 hours in. I looked at them. I said, this is how I've operated my entire life. Like what I'm experiencing right now, I couldn't turn off seeing auras. I couldn't, like everything. I said, this is what my life was like. Now I'm neurodivergent as well. So part of that, there is a connection between being neurodivergent, being on the autism spectrum and having more DMT running through the body and having this experience on a regular basis, and maybe in a psychedelic form where our sensory gates are not working. And we're like, that's part of anyone out there that might be neurodivergent and experience time and things in a little bit different way. That's just, I think, how my brain works and how people in that space work sometimes. But it's just really interesting. After 2 hours in, I was like, you mean to tell me that this is what it's like to trip? I was tripping my whole life. And so I thought to myself, if something can put people in a non-ordinary state that is safe and guided with the appropriate person, and it's not right for everybody, that to me was such a profound understanding, because for years I've been helping people through Reiki, through meditation, through yoga, all these different forms. I thought there's definitely ways for people to get in touch with their energy and experiencing energy instead of going, what are you talking about energy? This language is just like so new age and I don't get it. There's this cynicism around it because there's not an understanding of it when you haven't had those experiences. So I share that because I think that there is a lot of opportunities to, not only through psychedelics, but other means to get to that, like intense Kundalini breath work and regular, any transformational breath work can put you in those states. But I'd like to segue just briefly here. Was there be anything you'd like to share about psychedelics and about how those have helped integrate things for you, for your creativity, and even just that difference from an ordinary experience of being in the woods and seeing the mist, and then maybe being in a psychedelic full spectrum, like bandwidth of your consciousness, and being in the same place, and what the difference is in the experience?
Mm-hmm. There's so much I could say about that. And as you were speaking about how you were moving through the world, I'm like, wow, this is tripping. Like I've been doing this my whole life. When I was very young, like now I know that's where I was living also, but I really put that in a box and like contained it and put it away. So it took some time to unpack that. But I had a pretty profound psychedelic experience in 2007 that I wish that this painting that's often behind me, I could show you. I felt it was a near death experience that was also a psychedelic experience. And that really brought so much information to me. And I'm telling you, that was 2007. I'm still working with the information that came through during that process. So there's that piece. The other thing I'll say about psychedelics is later, I also used psilocybin to microdose to heal depression that was debilitating, that really almost ended my life. And I haven't had any recurrence of that. And that's been, gosh, like almost 10 years. So I very much believe in psychedelics as a healing tool. Specifically, I'm fond, again, that earth-based, like the psilocybin just feels right to me personally, but I recognize there's all kinds of other helpers out there as well.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because, of course, with the Central Pennsylvania Psychedelic Society, the nonprofit organization here in Central PA, that is much of our mission. That's why we're interviewing you today as well, to like educate more on the different uses. We're going to have obviously different episodes talking about different things. So we will dive into microdosing. We'll dive into treatment-resistant depression, some of the research. But I wanted to make sure we touched on it in here, because there is definitely interest, and we need to have these non-ordinary states, and it may not be right through doing psychedelics for everybody. Safety is really a big concern to make sure it's appropriate for someone. But I think in the day and age we're living, having experiences that get you out of the old system of thinking, where you might be trapped in fear, or your nervous system's stuck in a loop of trauma response, stress response, or you're in deep depression, right? We really need lots of tools, and something like what you're offering with creative synthesis and that self-awareness piece through working with coaching, I think that could be really, really powerful. But one of the things I want to move into is, you're saying that people have powerful visions, or like they can have insights in their life, and they don't know how to bring them into the daily existence, like to integrate them. Tell us a little bit about your creative synthesis process and how that helps bridge the gap between these visionary states where people have an experience in their body or a vision, and then how does that integrate with practical, like day-to-day embodiment?
Well, one of the things that's pretty common in non-ordinary states of consciousness or these visionary experiences is it's hard to find the words to explain to another human being what you have just experienced. And a lot of times, the people that you try to talk to, I know this was real for me and it's for other people that I've worked with as well, telling people what you experienced in a non ordinary state of consciousness can be destabilizing for the people around you who are not familiar with navigating that experience. So, from a practical level, creative synthesis, this approach gives people an opportunity to express what they experienced in a way that can create some space for connection with it. So in this scenario, like you'd be working with a person who's experienced non-ordinary states of consciousness. So there's this thing in psychosynthesis, which is what I weave into my work, and it's called an authentic unifying center. So there are many other ways that's been explained in all kinds of other approaches, but the bottom line is you're expressing in a creative way in the presence of an empathetic witness. So that's a huge part of it also. And then the words can come. And then you maybe try the words out with the person that you're working with. And there's a dialogue that happens so that maybe not right away, but over time, the deeper meaning that this experience has to unfold for you, which will continue, like I said, for a long time if we continue to work with it, right? So that you don't maybe have to go trying to tell everyone the vision that you had and, oh my gosh, this, oh my gosh, this, you need to do this. Like all of those things that happen when we're unprepared to be kind of exploded from the inside out, which sometimes happens with experiences like this. So I hope that answers your question. I can get off on a little tangent when I talk about things like this.
No, I love that. I think that's important for people to note. And also, I will want to touch on that. I think one of the deterrents that people I feel I've seen have had from maybe self-exploration is there's a lot of fear around self-exploration. There's a lot of fear around going inside of what they're going to find. And it's so interesting because when people they bring the bravery and courage to actually do, they will never and I've never met a person that has ever gone back. Oh my gosh, because that's where the power is. That's where your self-confidence lies, your true self-confidence, not overcompensating, peace, inner compassion, healing. And it's so interesting that I see a lot of people that there's still like this apprehension to doing a certain thing, and even with psychedelics being I could say quote unquote an extreme case, because people still have a lot of stigma that we're working to I really unravel for people around fear of having bad trips or bad experiences or this thing. But in life, things that happen to us, we could label as bad. We could put it in that category because humans, we like to do this polarized good or bad experience thing. And at the same time, you continue to work through life. And I think when you have more tools like the things you're offering, you have more grace, you have healing that can happen instead of it sits there buried for 20, 30 years and makes physical manifestations of health issues, relationship issues, issues in functioning, financial health issues, all the things that happen when we bury things. And that's why I think it's just a curious concept to me that they get afraid to look within. Oh, what's going to happen if I get my astrology chart read, or what's going to happen? And I'm only speaking for those out there that might have that thought going in your head. I'm sharing that because we did share that sometimes psychedelic experiences can be challenging. But if you're doing it with a guide and you're prepared and there's integration, there's a lot of other things we'll talk about on this podcast for that process. But I think it's important just to note that right now, there's a lot more scary things happening in the world out there with people not integrating and not processing and not looking within. And that what I've noticed is the more that people are fighting, looking at themselves and going and find that magic, that inner power through exploration in some way, the more that life seems to be continuing to tap them on the shoulder. I say it's the universal tap, tap, hello. And when they're not listening, it's a louder tap. And then finally, it's like the universal clue by four whapping across the face, and that the universe is loving and kind and trying to guide us back to our light, ourselves. But if we're not listening, it gets more painful and struggle and more suffering happens. So I want to just mention that. And if you have anything to share on top of that, Angel, please do.
Yeah, I think that's such an important awareness to have. And I talk about this a lot. I think there's this like sensor that goes off inside us when we're getting too close to something that's going to change our worldview, change our perspectives. And as humans, we don't like that. We like to know, we like to be certain, we like to make sure we're safe. And the reality is, life right now is a bad trip, right? And not just right now, but like this is an ongoing human thing. Like if bad trips can happen, but what do? They bring our awareness to these dynamics that we're living out in our daily life anyway that aren't helpful, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so I would say a lot of it has to do with availability, readiness. And there are times when you've said this too, it's just not safe and appropriate for someone to, like, if someone doesn't have, a stable home environment, if they're in a really abusive relationship, for example, it's probably not the time to focus on this. It's the time to focus on getting them safe, right? So it really does depend on an individual by individual basis. But I feel like I talk about astrology a lot as this time released wisdom capsule, this rotating sphere of wisdom that activates when we're ready. So readiness is a piece of that too.
Yeah. Tell us about astrology for yourself, for self-inquiry and transformation. Because we've definitely talked about astrology on the podcast here before. And I know we wanted to touch on planetary archetypes and how those help us navigate personal growth. And I'll just start off like right now. So those of you out there know about astrology, obviously Angel is. I went through a huge Pluto moon conjunction, which is very rare in someone's life. So Pluto conjunct my natal moon, Pluto, this death and rebirth planet 2 years ago. And now I'm in my Pluto square as I'm 40. So like all this like energy, the archetype of transformation, surrender, letting go. Where am I trying to still hold on and control? For me, if I would not have had the tool of astrology to have self-awareness around these points in times and seeing the patterns of this is actually happening in an external way and an internal way, I think that I would have not been as graceful or had this much grace moving through it. Now I have awareness of I need to take more time to practice surrender. I need to be more conscious with it. And it's not as hard, in my opinion. So I just wanted to share that. But tell us about your experience working with planetary archetypes and how those you feel help with personal growth and integration.
Well, I love your story. First of all, being aware of Pluto transit is very important. Keen and I studied with this one teacher who said, if a Pluto transit is happening in your transit chart, then nothing else is happening because really everything else falls under the rule of that Plutonic force that is pulling everything up. One of the things that I'm really present to when I work with people, even if we just have a little bit of time, is the nodes of the moon. So they give us like this sense of karmic story, or if past lives isn't accessible for someone, then we just kind of talk about the ways that might have shown up in life early in your life. And I just think it's fascinating to like just working with those. I'll use a personal example. The south node of the moon is in Cancer, the sign of Cancer. So the moon is really important in my chart. And that means the north node is in Capricorn, which means Saturn is also important in my chart. So these archetypes of loving, home, family, relationship, merging, just the all the emotional feels is in relationship with boxes and structure and limitation and that 2x4 that you mentioned, right? So these two natally for me are in a square, which is a difficult dynamic. So like we could just use that piece of information and have a conversation about life and how these archetypes show up for, at least 10, 15 minutes.
That's fantastic. And I think that gives you so much insight. And like, if you go into these archetypes, and I love that when someone can work with someone like you, they don't have to learn all the astrology. So I say the language of astrology. They don't have to understand what does this square, sextile, like all the different aspects mean. It's like you can explain it to them in a story format, and then they can relate to it and then say, this is definitely something that is interesting. And then I think a lot of times with the planetary aspects, you can get awareness of what might be helpful here in this situation.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
absolutely. And that part about astrologies is such a big thing. And I mean, I certainly did this early in my studies and practice, even. I want to talk about it all because it fascinates me. Like that's how my mind is wired. But to move into this consultation role and a facilitator as a translator in plain language, that is really a different experience for people. So you really don't need to know anything about astrology to have a very profound experience with it.
Yeah, I have to watch myself when I'm in public with groups of people where we have a group of people, maybe 3 or 4 are really into astrology. We could go off and start talking about it. And I'm aware that that can feel isolating, and it can feel like I can see from a perception to like, wow, this feels kind of like a cult. Like people feeling like if they don't understand anything you're talking about, it just feels like very foreign, and you can feel really left out of like, what am I missing? And maybe I'm not enough because I don't understand this. So I just want to remind people that if astrology is part of your journey to learn it, it will be theirs to learn. If it's just yours to work with someone like Angel to guide you and not having to remember all this stuff because you have other things your life is guiding you to do, right? I just want people to remember that because I think people get really excited about the spiritual path and they feel like they have to learn everything and understand everything, go down all the rabbit holes in either the metaphysical or the holistic health realm with diet. There's a lot of things when you're living a conscious lifestyle. And I'm just like, just be where you're at. You're going to still get what you need to get out of life. Yeah. And talking about that, where you're at, life does have cycles. And one of the blessings I think about being on this planet is we go through so many cycles. And I think this is something the human consciousness isn't always consciously aware of, but I have been, because cycles are very impactful for me as a medium. I feel the cycles of the moon, the lunar cycles. We're going to talk about that. I'm very sensitive to even just the solar cycles. If we have solar flares or solar activity, I feel that. I feel the consciousness of people through the changes of the seasons and the zodiac signs, and like how collective consciousness shifts and they either get more, aggressive or more peaceful, and different aspects that are happening. So I find the cycles in general in humanity really a beautiful offering, because we have so many cycles. A different planet may have, like, it may take 400 days to get, one day cycle. Obviously, they burn up on that planet. There'd be too much sunlight for them. But I just think about that as an opportunity that when we go through cycles as a human, we go through these different brainwave states and different states of consciousness. And it's like either a yawn state of active mind or more relaxed state. And the cycles of the sun and the moon naturally put us through those. And I think when we have a beginning of a cycle, there's always an opportunity for, the beginning of the hero's journey in some way of like learning something. And then there's the middle, and then there's the apex and the end. And I just think that because we have so many cycles of day, season, years in our consciousness on this planet, we have so much more opportunity to grow than we would on another planet. And I think about that because I really connected with like interdimensional beings in a way. Like, where do things connect of what their consciousness might be like on a different landscape of consciousness? I know that might be a little out there for people, but that's just how I think. So I'm curious about you, because you have your south node in the moon. Cancer is ruled by the moon. Lunar cycles, like you said, absolutely would be really important for you. So I would imagine working with someone like yourself, it's even more powerful because you're so tapped into the wisdom of the moon. So what are these cycles as far as you? How do they serve for reflection, and how do you use them for a creative framework for self-discovery?
Thank you for asking that. Well, I think the most fundamental thing to me is our emotional well-being. I do a lot of work to help people just remember to feel, period. Like it's okay to feel. And we can be afraid to feel because a lot of times we feel like we're going to get swept away by the feeling. Like if we allow this feeling to happen, I can't contain it again. So the moon attuning to that cycle can be really helpful in that way, because we can see, most people know, like, oh, it's a full moon, I'm going to look up at the full moon, right? People associate it with lunacy and all kinds of like extraordinary experiences happening. Is it a full moon? They say whenever something weird happens. But looking at all of the cycles, like the new moon when it's dark, we start to see how just those two things explain a lot about our experiences. And sometimes maybe we are in a big expressive emotional mode. Maybe the moon is in Leo, and maybe it has an aspect to our natal moon. And we don't even need to know all of the details of the astrology, by the way, but just knowing, looking up and seeing as it's moving, like, so too are we moving through different things. And personally, I love to track where the moon is, what the phase is, what house it is in my chart, so that I'm just able to plan my life a little better. Now, I don't plan every little thing by consulting my lunar book, because it's kind of difficult to do that. But the moon is a beautiful being, because when we start paying attention to the moon starts communicating with us more. So we don't have to have it all figured out. We just have to start somewhere. And that,
Oh, I love that. I think that the extraordinary experience of just having an everyday interaction, communication with something that's not what we would consider as human, whether it's a plant or a star, or the moon or the sun. I think just those experiences in general bring about creativity and the creative childlike mind states in general. Like that's how we tap into that flow
oh,
state.
yeah, you better believe when I know that the moon is in Leo for me, or, contacting Venus, a bunch of different things that happen for me. I'm like, that is a day that I'm blocking off for myself if I can, right? Because I want to maximize the opportunity for myself to be in that creative space.
I love that. Wonderful. I'd love to see, as we wrap up here, what do you have as far as your final thoughts about creativity and personal and then collective healing?
Well, I'm on this mission. I have these little rainbow pencils. You see them? Yeah. So, oh, there we go. I'm on
Oh,
a,
I love that.
yeah, they're so much fun. And I'm on a mission. Like, I just want to hand these out to everybody and a couple so they can hand them to people that they know. I feel like it's a big part of my journey to help people remember themselves as creator beings, really. Like, we could go off on other tangents. I'm sure we would have a lot of things to talk about, Kara, in the more cosmic realm, and like galactic experiences and things like that. But we can just bring that all into wherever we are right now. And that's why I do this. Like, it's playful, it's easy. You don't need a lot of tools. You don't really need a rainbow pencil, but everyone that has them has a good time with them. They're like, wow, I didn't know I could feel this way. So, yeah, I think it starts with us. In fact, in the creative synthesis process, I'm developing a workshop to teach therapists and healers to use this approach. And it's three parts. It's embodied, which is doing it for ourselves. It's applied. So we're beginning to work with it with clients as appropriate. And then it's amplified. So once we've embodied this, we're sharing it with others. What happens next, right? That's that collective piece that ripples out in a beautiful.
I just want to speak to the desire and the calling on your heart at this time on the planet to make an impact. That's something that I resonate so much with. And I think a lot of the listeners and the other guests on here are really serious about making an impact, not just through doing your own healing work, like walking the talk, like you said, embodying it takes you to that next step where you're amplifying, and then you're really making a ripple effect and making a huge impact. And I will share to the listeners too, at this point in time, like, this is my own personal opinion, but I fully have so much reverence and respect and trust for people who not only have the capacity to bridge the gap between talking about galactic, cosmic, really out there stuff, but actually to bring it back and truly ground it into a practical state, and not be in a space where they're competitive, or they're in a space where they're trying to prove themselves, or they have to defend their position. I will share, if anyone is working on level of learning discernment, just me sitting with Angel here today and some of the other guests that come on, I just say, yes, the full body, full spectrum human experience of being able to go into the mystery, being able to fully be in emotion and the unknowing, but also expand into these states that you're okay. We're okay being in these states where other people are like, you guys are crazy. But at the same time, we can come back really, actually, we're not that unhinged, because we can still think critically, think logically, and know how to apply it practically to the world, that the framework in which the world is falling right now, like this old paradigm, we need to still bridge the gap. So there's a lot of way showers right now that are coming on into my circle, onto this show, that I really revere and honor, because this is what it takes. It takes the ability to stand in our truth, to potentially have lots of criticism kind of come at us, because people don't have that expanded awareness yet to understand it. And I say have that expanded awareness, not from a place of judgment of they're not as conscious and not aware. That is an old paradigm thinking of good, better, best. We don't do that in this space. That's just not where we're operating from. And I can see that clearly with you, Angel. And I want to speak to that, because it takes a lot of wisdom and a lot of hard work and a lot of courage and something life force source doing something creatively magnificent. We have no idea, to be able to help us to hold that type of space where we're able to be very practical, very grounded, and also go into these really altered states. I think the more bandwidth someone has to navigate these non-ordinary states and to think outside the box is going to create so much more resilience in the rest of our lives here as we're shifting this huge great awakening. Like, the resilience is necessary at this point. It's a non-negotiable. And the more you're going to squirm and not be able to sink into those things, it's going to be harder for people. So I really encourage people to get in touch with someone like Angel here. While we're talking about that specifically, the listeners who are like, I really want to get in touch, I want to connect with her, work with her, what are the upcoming workshops or astrology offerings or your new moon blessing book? What can we learn about your offering in specifics?
Thank you, Kara. And just thank you for everything you just said about that journey, like of expansion and then bringing it really back into the community in a way that is appropriate and resonant and meaningful. That is just so important. So the easiest way to find me is at angel-living.com. And most of my information is on there. The New Moon Blessing book is on there. So that is something that I'm just really excited about. It's a gamified membership platform. So it is virtual, and it's a way, like, I can show you, this is my New Moon Blessing book that I'm working with right now, but can kind of get a sense for the pages and just what happens in that space. So that's a monthly or an annual membership, and people can just check it out for a month. So it's just a sweet place. Also, I have 2 workshops coming up in creative synthesis for therapists and healers. And that is not on my website yet, but it's getting there. But I have information that if people wanted to know more about that, they could find out by reaching out to me. We're going to start doing slow art Sundays, the last Sunday of each month. It's kind of based on this global slow art movement where you just look at one piece of art for a longer time than you normally would. And then there's a process that goes into that. So that's a very community oriented way to just viewing art, by the way, is enough to help us get out of that rut that we're often in. So we'll kind of be playing along with that. And yeah, readings are always an option. That's a great way to get to know yourself and your chart. And yeah, I think that covers it.
And then do you offer readings remotely online as well, or just all your offerings in person?
That's a great question. I do online readings, and I'm also working at a local therapist's office in Lemoyne I can do readings there and also creative processes. And
wonderful.
I do have I don't know when this episode will air, but the rest of this month in April, I have a special for people it's a spring special. It's 30 minutes reading. So
awesome. And then if someone wanted to start using creativity today to bridge their inner and outer worlds, like something simple, something practical, what could they do today after listening to this episode?
Yeah, I do love that circle, but Since I already talked about that, I'll talk about the heart. My partner and I used to do heart parties as we were developing this creative synthesis approach. And it does involve the heart math techniques. So the easiest way to do this is just to give yourself a moment, grab a pen, a pencil, a piece of paper, and draw your awareness to the center of your chest. And you might even touch that space there and allow whatever's heavy. Like, it doesn't take long for whatever that thing is that's weighing us down to come up into our mind. And so just drawing a heart, like I talked about the circle over and over again, it's the same thing with the heart. You just back and forth, and it becomes a meditative process. And as you are focusing on the issue at hand, bringing it into your heart space, creating with that, it starts to soften the edges and loosen. And often other information will come through for us in that short process. And if not, at least it helps lighten the load a little bit. It just, like, if the volume was at an 8, maybe it turns down to a 6.
That's perfect. I love that. Perfect, practical, and that's something I could totally do. I feel like that's something that's so appropriate for like kids too.
Oh my gosh.
Like, yeah.
Kids.
Yeah.
Yep, kids and grown-ups. I love children. People often ask, do you work with kids? Because I love them. And I say I work for kids by helping the adults that are in their lives come back to this place where they can then connect with the kids where they are.
Oh my gosh, I just like my feeling tears of joy, like thinking about that. That's incredible. Thank you for that work.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 final questions for you that we ask everyone on their first episode with us. First one is, what is your favorite self-care indulgence or activity at this time for yourself?
Well, today and a lot of days, it's an Epsom salt bath with lavender and candles and music and dark bathroom.
Awesome. Do you do that on a cycle with the moon, by the way? I'm just curious.
No, it's not really so much like, I don't ritualize it necessarily. Like, it's not like I do it every full moon. I need baths a lot. I don't have water in my chart, interestingly. I have the South Node in Cancer, and that's it. So for me, baths are it's just where it happens for me.
I have a clawfoot bathtub. That's my best, most favorite, like you could call it an appliance. It's not really an appliance, but it's like my favorite thing in my house because of the bath time. That's one of my big things too. I love that. If you could detox one thing in your life or the world right now, what would it be?
There's a lot of things, but the thing that keeps coming to me recently is it doesn't have to be hard and it doesn't have to take a long time. So as I engage with these projects I'm doing, I'm busy, like there's a lot going on, and I love all of this. And sometimes I can get a little paralyzed because I think, this is too much. I can't do it. It's going to take too long. I just don't, or it's going to be too hard. So that's kind of been my mantra lately. And I would love to extend that into the world at large.
Perfect. I think that the concept, what you're saying here is some people are thinking everything that's changed, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be a lot of suffering. And I really love that perspective, because when you drop into the space in which you're doing this work and you're doing this inner awareness, and it doesn't actually have to be that way. It's about nervous system resetting and getting rid of the old stories, I think, that can make way for the new mystery to unfold in a way that maybe is, if we have an expectation it's going to be hard, then maybe it will be. So if we can open up to not being, I think that's the magic right there. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here with us today, Angel. I feel like I could talk to you for a whole another 2-3 hours, but we appreciate it and all the work you're doing. And everyone, if you have any questions, reach out directly to Angel. Her information will be in the show notes. And again, we appreciate you listening to all of our episodes. If you love this episode, share it with a friend, and we will talk to you again soon. And be well until next time, my friends. Bye.
Bye.
So I'm going to take a moment here just while we're still on recording. Is it okay if we briefly introduce your upcoming class for the Psychedelic Society?
Oh, yeah,
and what to
absolutely.
expect? Okay, I'll take this, clip it out, and then do something separate for us. Okay, cool. All right. All right, everybody. So I'm here with Angel Living, and coming up here May 10th at Firefly Hollow Wellness Center, we are doing a nonprofit fundraiser for the Central Pennsylvania Psychedelic Society. So this organization is a nonprofit organization with a medical board. There are no drugs being used, sold, or distributed. We are an organization for education, harm reduction, and sharing about the research that's coming out, and even podcast episodes for you to learn a little bit more. But the fundraising piece will be offering with Angel Living and Kian Living. And Angel, she is actually an evolutionary astrologer, a creative guide, a meditation facilitator, and she has a background in psychological evolutionary astrology, heart math mentorship, and intentional creativity. So her and her partner help bridge mystical experiences with grounded wisdom. So this particular event is called Consciousness and Creativity. And I'd love for you to share with us what we'll be experiencing in this event and how it might be supportive for people who are attending.
Thank you, Kara. Yes, I would love to. When you brought this idea to us, I got so excited because at the time I was working on this painting of like the cosmos, right? So if we think about expanding way out, expanding our consciousness and moving out into these great expanses, right? That we don't really have a frame of reference for here on Earth, except we can just kind of look up in awe. So that's going to be a big part of what we're doing. We're going to find ourselves here on this earth where we are right now, and then begin to little by little expand out through the different galactic layers. Like we're here in this Milky Way galaxy, and there's the Virgo cluster that contains that, and this Laniakea supercluster that just had me really alive when we talked about this. So that's what I've used to create this experience is for us to find ourselves here, move out layer by layer by layer, get some kind of cosmic insight, and then bring it back layer by layer into.
And this is through a meditative experience. We're going to be moving our body and getting involved in the embodiment process as well, so we can take that experience through this meditative experience and put it on canvas.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's really important when exploring these non-ordinary states of consciousness to have a firm grasp on where we are oriented on Earth. So we start there with the body, and then we move out, and then we come back in.
And then from what I understand, we're also be incorporating guided breath work and some sounds as well to maybe facilitate us getting into a nice, relaxed, altered state for getting into that.
Yeah, that's right. The body-based practices that I use will be breath focused. So we'll be using breath and the body together. We're hoping to have a very special sound making device for this event. But either way, if we don't have that, we'll be using the original sound, which is our voice.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We look forward to having you guys. And again, if you are interested, you can sign up on the Psychedelic Society's website. I'll share the information as well as Firefly Hollow's website, and all the proceeds here. Most of the proceeds will go towards the Psychedelic Society for our fundraiser. So we appreciate you guys checking that out, sharing it with friends. And we look forward to seeing you guys on May 10th. Sign up and register ahead of time. Bye.